Hi everyone, I'm Adam.
Hey Adam.
Hi. I'm really excited to be here because one of my favorite things to do ever is take ideas that I've learned in the music space or the climate space or the sustainability space and apply them in other places. I think of the idea of innovation as, yes, creating things that are new that people haven't thought of before, but I think one of the most creative ways to think about innovation is to take things that work really well. Look at the people who have the best ideas in all of these different sectors and apply them in places that you never would have thought they might work. So I'm going to tell you a couple of different stories today about how we did this. When I say we, I mean the band, I mean my organization called Planet Reimagined, and the work that I've done working for different political campaigns. And just to be clear, when I say working for political campaigns, I work equally for Republicans and Democrats because my goal is to bring politicians together to make the planet a habitable one for all of us. So, thank you. Let's start with this. A new climate for social innovation. So we're going to be talking a lot about climate change. We're going to be talking a lot about social action. But really at its core, what we're going to be talking about is how to effectively bring people together for change. We can apply a bunch of these ideas that we're going to be talking about to any different kind of area of social action. So, does this look familiar? And when I say this, I'm going through some slides on the different screens. So, corporate social innovation, this should look familiar. It is also on this poster over here. Advocating for social issues, engaging in responsible business practices, aligning profit and purpose, and giving back to society. I love that these are the 4 pillars here because all 4 of them align with pretty much everything I am going to talk about today. So let's start with these 2 questions. These are the 2 questions that I get most often. When I'm on the road, I do these things called meet and greets. Are we familiar with this idea of a meet and greet? Yeah. So a meet and greet, before we go on stage, fans will come up to us, because they purchased a ticket, and they'll say, you know, we want to take a photo, we want to tell you a story. But when fans want to talk to me about action, they generally ask me one of these 2 questions. And these 2 questions are, what can I do? And, what can I do? A lot of people are apathetic. A lot of people don't think that they're going to be able to make any sort of difference in their community, in their state, in their country, in the world. A lot of people come to me to try and figure out what that roadmap is for them to be able to participate in something bigger. And what I tell them right away is that they're already participating in something bigger. When we first started as a band, we got our start street performing in Washington Square Park in New York City. And honestly, that was the most nervous I've ever been in my entire life. Because think about it this way. When we're going out and singing with these kind of microphones that we got from Radio Shack, which I don't think Radio Shack exists anymore, but do we know what Radio Shack is? Okay, good. We got these like tiny little microphones, cost $29. And we would be playing on the street. And when you're playing on the street, no one's there to see you. You have to convince people to stop and watch what you're doing. Now, if we're playing at a place like Wells Fargo, everyone's actually there to see us, right? We didn't need to convince anybody that they should be paying attention to the music. That was the most nerve-wracking thing ever. But what started to happen over time on the street was we started to build this community of people. We started to build this fan base. And I love this idea of a fan base because it's not just about a whole bunch of different people looking towards us, looking towards the artists, looking to participate in the stuff that we're doing. But they've started to build a community of themselves. And when they ask me a question like, what can I do? They don't feel like they're in this community that's building anything. They already are. Just by showing up at a show, they know what it's like to be in a community. Just by participating in this fan culture online and social media, they're part of this fan community. But how do you go about building a fan community? If you take a look at the slides, there are 2 different images here. One is a ladder, and the other one is the best approximation of a hurricane that we could find. I promise it's a hurricane, just go with it. So traditionally, when you're trying to get people engaged in something, this idea of a ladder has historically been the idea, right? You get on one rung of the ladder, and then you take another step, and you take another step, and you get more and more engaged in something. A lot of people think about customer acquisition this way, right? You're bringing them up, getting them more engaged with the brand. This model doesn't really work anymore, because this model implies that people are doing this alone, and they're not doing it with input and with engagement from other people. A fan base used to be developed using this idea of a ladder because people were doing it alone. They didn't have this community around them. The new model looks like a hurricane. When a band is first starting, they'll generally have a small number of fans that are really excited about what they're doing. And the best way to grow this fan base is to bring these fans really close to you as an artist. Give them all the tools to then go out in the world and become evangelizers for the work that you're doing. Think about it this way. When we were first starting, we had 15 fans. That's it. We were putting videos up on YouTube. We had a couple of subscribers there, a couple of followers on Facebook. MySpace, do we remember MySpace? These people were so invested because they felt like they had ownership over our work because they were the only ones that knew about us. We gave them free posters, free tickets to shows. We basically sent them out to become our street team, our community. And that gave them the buy-in to start to invite their friends, their family to the shows. And these 15 people became 500 people, became 10,000 people, became millions of people around the world now that are engaging with our music. But it's all because when people first engage with the work we're doing, we're bringing them close and then sending them out in the world to become our evangelizers. Okay. In building this fan base, one of the really important things is storytelling. So over the next, however many minutes I have left, I'm going to talk about a couple of tactics, right? So this idea of fan building, ladders and hurricanes, two different kind of big ideas of how to build a fan base. But storytelling is more concrete tactic. Do we know who the person is on the bottom left? Feel free to shout it out if you know. Bob Dylan, yes. Somebody said the wrong name. I couldn't even tell who it was, but I'm not going to call you out. But the answer is Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan wrote protest music that was big and inspiring, and he got people to participate because of this narrative that everybody could relate to. But at the same time, there was another approach. Does anyone know who the person on the bottom right is? This one's a lot harder. Any guesses? Johnny Cash. There's a guess of Johnny Cash. That is incorrect. Good try, though. Is it what? It is not Elvis. So this person is named Phil Oakes. Has anybody ever heard of Phil Oakes? Yes, thank you. Yes. So Phil Oakes was a contemporary of Bob Dylan, and Phil Oakes wrote music that was really specific, really angry, really different from the approach that Bob Dylan took. Bob Dylan kicked Phil Oakes out of his limo one day because he called him not a songwriter, but a singing journalist. Phil Oakes visited Mississippi and was so horrified by what he saw there that he wrote a song called Here's to the State of Mississippi. And the chorus of that song goes, "Mississippi, find yourself another country to be part of." Literally. It's a completely different kind of storytelling, right? It's very specific, very much attacking the person who he's talking about. Two different approaches. How about the person on the upper left? Billie Holiday, that is correct. Well done. Billie Holiday, another very different type of storytelling. The song Strange Fruit has been credited as one of the drivers of the beginning of the civil rights movement. It is an incredibly powerful song. If you don't know the song, feel free to go home and listen to it. But the lyrics of the song are just one part of the story. When Billie Holiday would perform this song in the clubs in downtown New York, every person who was serving food would stop, all of the lights would go out, and a pin spotlight would show up on Billie. She would then sing this song, and it was so poignant that she would not bow, she would not come back for an encore, she would just walk off stage. Her goal was to make her audience uncomfortable. Her goal was to draw attention to the civil rights movement, to draw attention to the injustices that were happening. That form of storytelling, making your audience uncomfortable, has been used for the last 50 years by people who were protesting and striking. This idea of storytelling is another key piece. How about the upper right? Tracy Chapman, yes. So Tracy Chapman's Fast Car got to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 when it first came out. But another artist covered this song just a handful of years ago. Does anyone know who that artist is? Luke Combs. Yeah, who said that? Yeah, very nice. Luke Combs covered that song. In 2022, that song got to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, higher than when Tracy Chapman first put out her original. This idea of storytelling is basically telling us that a story can be retold over and over and over again when it reaches different audiences in different ways. Tracy Chapman's song about a woman trying to escape poverty, escape a relationship, a really difficult family situation. Storytelling has so much power. Okay, last picture, the one in the middle. What is it? Hamilton. How many people have seen Hamilton? Excellent. How many people have listened to the score, the music from Hamilton? Amazing. So this is a really interesting story. When Lin-Manuel Miranda first started writing Hamilton, he was invited to the White House. And he was actually invited to the White House to sing songs from his previous show. Does anyone know what his previous show was? In the Heights, exactly. So he goes to the White House, he plays some songs from In the Heights, and then he plays the first song from Hamilton, and the entire audience laughs. The entire audience thinks this is ridiculous. A musical about a founding father who was white and not played by a white man. Insanity, right? Jon Stewart did a segment on his show the following night saying, "This is ridiculous, this show should never be made. I can't believe that Lin-Manuel Miranda would do this." The great thing is that 6 years later, there's a video of Jon Stewart and Barack Obama backstage at Hamilton saying it's the greatest thing they've ever seen. It's amazing. You should look up this video clip. But this goes to show that storytelling is really important, just as much for the story itself, but knowing when your audience is ready to hear that story. The audience wasn't ready to hear Hamilton after we were coming out of 2008, building back the economy. 6 years later, we had a booming economy. We were in Barack Obama's second term. It was at a time that was perfect for this Broadway show. And Lin-Manuel Miranda understood that. So there's so many different types of storytelling techniques that are key when you're talking about innovation. Okay, if anybody knows who this is, and they're not getting a copy of the book, I'm going to give them a copy of the book. Anybody? No, sorry, it's not Sigmund Freud. Any other guesses? No, not Louis Pasteur. Anyone else? Last guess. Yeah. Oh my God. Well done. Well done. Here, you can have a copy of the book.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
This is Emil Durkheim. Emil Durkheim is a sociologist. He wrote a book called Elementary Forms of Religious Life, and he came up with this idea called collective effervescence. This is my favorite term in the world, collective effervescence, not just because it's fun to say, but also because it means something amazing. Emil Durkheim looked at religious spaces where people would get together, all focused on the same thing, and he would look at their energy. He would look at how the energy of individuals came together to become one unified whole. And so I said, this is exactly what happens in a Taylor Swift concert. It is. Tens of thousands of people show up and see Taylor Swift. I went to see Taylor in Miami. Have any of you seen Taylor? Okay, a couple people. Thousands of people are getting together who have never met each other before. They're all singing the same songs. They're all dancing together. They're holding hands with people that they've never met before. It becomes this group think, right? And so the academic side of my brain said, okay, what if we could measure that? What if we could make use of that? What if we could take that idea of collective effervescence and turn it into something for good? Not that, dancing at a Taylor Swift concert isn't really good. So we embarked on this major study. What we did is we sent a poll out to 350,000 recent ticket purchasers. We partnered with Ticketmaster on this to understand how fans were willing to take some sort of social action while they were at a concert. Whether that was through a QR code that was up on the screens, whether that was while they were in the car driving there, whether it was they were sitting on the toilet and there was a QR code on the back of the door. We literally measured where they were willing to take this action, and then we measured what actions they were willing to take. Were they willing to phone bank on site to call their representative about voting on a specific issue? Were they willing to sign petitions, volunteer for local organizations, register to vote? I'm talking about real, concrete civic and political action. I'm not talking about switching the kind of straw you're using. We're way past that. I'm not talking about making a pledge to go vegan once a week. We're way past that. Civic and political action, really doing something concrete. And the results of the study told us that people are more than willing to do that under the right circumstances. So this is just a little bit of the data. We have hundreds and hundreds of pages of data that we collected. But just 10 years ago, these numbers would not have been true. Climate change is vitally important to music fans, and I'm not just talking about our fans. We looked at country fans, and hip hop fans, and rock fans, all these different genres across the country. Climate change is a defining issue for them. And Live Nation told us that last year alone, 250 million people attended a concert in the United States. That's where people are. And if you want to meet people where they are, they're at concerts, they're at sports events, they're at these live spaces where people are getting together with other people in person. And so what we did is we took all of this data, and so much more data than what you'll see on this slide, but we took all of this data and we implemented it in person at our shows, at our concerts. We're doing the same thing this summer with Billie Eilish on her UK tour. We did something with the 1975, if you're familiar with them. I Heart Jingle Ball is a series of concerts across the country. We did it with them. And basically, we are turning concerts into a space where people can engage with social issues at a deeper level. I hate the phrase meeting people where they're at, right? Because if you just met people where they were, that would be business as usual. And we don't want business as usual, we want innovation. We want people to take those next steps. So we're gonna go to where people are, but we're gonna give them the tools to take those next 5 steps forward. And that's what this was. At our tour this past summer, 15% of people who walked through the door took some sort of civic or political action. 15%. Seems like a low percentage, but in total, that's a huge number of people who are not even there to do that. They're there to just listen to music. But 15% of people, depending on where we were, called their representative literally on site, signed petitions, volunteered to work with local nonprofits, registered to vote, took some sort of action. One of my favorite things is that we discovered that if you can get people in person a second time, then they become interested for life. What I mean by that is that if we want to turn more people into people who are taking action around social issues, this can't be done online. This can't be done with one in-person event. You have to get them to 2 places that are physical in the world. Then they have a real visceral connection to the actions that they're taking. Okay, let's talk about another thing. Games. Games are another really key tool that we've borrowed from a lot of other places and applied in music, and then taken these ideas and applied them for innovation, especially in the climate space. All right, upper left, everyone together. Taylor Swift, yes. Taylor Swift plays games with her fans all the time. She hides things in lyrics, she hides things in albums. But one of the things that she did a couple years ago online was she used a game tactic where she put all of her fans in competition with each other. They needed to on a scavenger hunt across the internet to try and find these clues, and they had to log onto this website. She put them in competition with each other. That's one form of gaming, competition, right? You can create games where people are in competition with each other. Another form of gaming, does anyone know who's on the bottom? Yeah, who said that? Nice, 21 Pilots. 21 Pilots uses a different kind of gamification. They use something called world building. Are we familiar with this idea of world building in video games? So world building is allowing the people who are playing to immerse themselves in everything from the story to the visuals to the activities. It is creating a space for people to live. Think Sims, right? Think you're building this world around you, you're participating in the world, and what 21 Pilots did was they created a multi-album world that they were building. They, album after album, expanded the world, created more characters, created more places for people to live. Another type of game. Okay, the last one on the upper right, who's that? Yeah, that's me. We saw what 21 Pilots were doing, we saw what Taylor Swift was doing, and we said, okay, competition, that's great. World building, that's great. World building takes a lot of work, and we don't have that kind of time. So we said, what if we can create a game that forced people to work together collaboratively? What if we could create an activity that would make all our fans who were traditionally in competition with each other for merch that would sell out, or concert tickets that would sell, what if we could make them work together? So here's what we did. When the track list for one of our albums came out, we took it and we cut it up into about 50 different pieces. We made a jigsaw puzzle out of this track list. We sent different pieces of this track list to different areas of our fan base across the internet. One piece on Twitter, one piece on our text list, one piece on Discord, one piece on Facebook, on Instagram, on not MySpace, because that was, didn't exist anymore. But everywhere you could think. In 3 hours, our fan base, which was disparate across all of these different platforms, came together as one unit because they had to in order to build this track list. We got more traction on that post than any post that we've had in years because they were the first ones to post the track list. We didn't post it. They felt ownership over the product. And they wanted to tell their friends and tell their family, look what I did. I made this. We didn't care. Yeah, of course we wrote the album and we put out the album. But they had ownership over it because they worked together and they solved this problem. And they were able to become our biggest evangelizers. That's something that we've applied in the climate movement over and over and over again. The climate movement is really disparate, right? You have the people who are focused on biodiversity loss. You have the people who are focused on atmospheric science, the people who are focused on tech and pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, people who are focused on oceans and forests, on waste, on agriculture, on cement and steel production, all of these different areas of the climate movement. The Inflation Reduction Act was negotiated between 2021 and 2022. It was the largest investment in climate in world history. This required bringing together all the different pieces of the climate movement. I worked on this bill when it was a bill, and then I worked on getting it passed with the White House and in Congress. And one of my favorite things to do is to sit down with people who disagree with me and find common ground. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how to get Republicans and Democrats together, how to build this coalition, how to get people to actually collaborate. So I sat down with just as many Republicans as I did Democrats. You can probably tell that I am a Democrat, but I will speak with any Republican who wants to speak with me. When I sat down with Republicans, I listened. When I sat down with Democrats, I listened. That is the number one most important lesson that I took away from working with any politician, is spend the majority of your time in the beginning listening. Because they will tell you exactly what they want. They will tell you exactly how to get what you want out of them. And most importantly, they will teach you the language that you need to use in order to move things forward. So, although the Inflation Reduction Act passed without any Republican support, it's a whole nother story that we don't have time for today, the work that Republicans and Democrats could do together, I saw a future for this. In all of my listening, we found an area for collaboration. And this is really technical permitting area called effective land use. What we did was we measured in partnership with NASA. We looked at all of the oil and gas leases across the United States and said, what if we could put solar on top of oil and gas production? What if we could put wind on top of oil and gas production? Why has nobody thought of this before? And so we did this massive undertaking. And for the first time in US history, little over a year ago, the Department of Interior said, okay, we are going to start allowing new renewable energy to sit on top of oil and gas leases. This opened up about 18 million acres of land across the United States, particularly in the West, in order to put solar and wind on top of it. Now, when I walked into a Republican office and was trying to sell this idea, I did not talk about renewable energy. I did not talk about solar. I did not talk about wind. I talked about the number of jobs that it would create in their district. I talked about the local economies. I talked about how we were engaging with oil and gas in order to support America's energy needs. When I met with Democrats, of course I talked about solar and wind, but I also still talked about jobs and the economy. I talked about pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. I talked about climate change. When I was with Republicans, I talked about clean energy. When I was with Democrats, I talked about renewable energy. This was one bill. This was not two different bills with two different sets of language. But this is how you sell things to different people. There's so many benefits to this idea of sharing land between different types of energy. We can slash the carbon footprint on these public lands. The environmental review process generally takes years. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but it takes years. It can take up to 6 years to get permitting for new solar. Because this oil and gas land has already gone through the environmental review process, we can cut 5 of those years out of the process. We can be building new solar and wind on this type of land within 1 year. It also saves all of this wild land that would have been considered for wind or solar. We don't need that anymore. We can use all of this land that's already been disturbed. So if you find these areas for collaboration that are surprising and different, that's, for me, where innovation happens. That's where the big changes happen. And if you can find the right language to talk to all of these disparate parties, that's how you can actually get things done. I have one more thing I want to talk about. Featuring. So, you might know that some of your favorite musicians and artists out there do something called featuring. They will generally work with another artist that's outside of their genre, outside of their friend group, in order to try and reach audiences that they wouldn't necessarily capture with their own music. Does anyone know who's on the upper left?
No doubt.
I'm sorry?
No doubt.
It's not No Doubt. It is Rosé and Bruno Mars. Yes, excellent. They have a song together. Is it called Apatup? Yeah. Rosé and Bruno Mars. Rosé is a K-pop artist, and Bruno Mars is Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars understood that having a K-pop artist featured on his song would actually make the music reach a whole different kind of audience. Completely different from what he would have gotten before. How about on the upper right? Ariana Grande and Jessie J, yes. Ariana Grande, Nicki Minaj, Jessie J. 3 different artists, 3 different audiences. Their song, Bang Bang, was a, 5 times platinum hit, was massive. They did this because they had 3 different audiences at the time, and that combined audience made the song huge. Bottom picture? Yes, Iggy Azalea and Charlie XCX. I'm sorry, Iggy, but Charlie won this one. Yeah, Iggy did not have any Brad Summer. It was very sad for her. Again, reached a completely different audience because the two of them came together. I'm going to give you one statistic. For every degree increase in temperature, average temperature in the United States, there are 7% more gun-related deaths. I'm going to say that one more time. This is a study out of the University of Chicago. For every degree increase in temperature, there are 7% more gun-related deaths. There is a huge opportunity for people to work across different areas of social action because everything is interconnected. Climate change, for me, is everything. It's a health crisis, it's an immigration crisis, it's a gun crisis, it's a food crisis, it's how we make things, it's how we get from place to place. It really is everything. Imagine if we could take all of these different fan bases, all of these different groups that are working on all of these different issues to help us solve big structural problems. This idea of featuring, this idea of working across audiences that you wouldn't think could work together, really do work together. I've started to work with a handful of other organizations that are in the health space, that are outside the climate space. This idea of collaboration is incredibly key. So before I pause, I'm going to want to engage with you, talk to you all, get some questions. I just want to drive home the fact that as much as I love new ideas, as much as I love creativity and outside the box thinking, some of the best ideas for innovation, whether we're talking in business or we're talking in social action, come from some of the most unexpected places. I'm a musician. That's what I started doing now. Music is my night job because I do climate policy during the day. Some of my favorite ideas that I've come up with in climate policy were because I was inspired by being on tour. I was inspired by looking at how merch supply chains work. I was inspired by looking at how vinyl pressing happens for music. This is not unique, right? There's so many people around the world who work in various different sectors and take one idea and apply it to the others. This is an exercise that I encourage you all to do because creativity is living in the cracks. Creativity is living in this liminal space. It's living in the space between ideas that have been established. So my call to action for you all is to go home and think about the work that you've been doing. Figure out where else your ideas can apply. For me, that is the key to social innovation. Thank you so much. And now we'll have some questions.